This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're in a galaxy far, far away as we talk about Star Wars The Bad Batch, Episode 1, Aftermath.
Well, what is his status?
CT-9904's genetic mutations have altered much of his cranial activity, including his inhibitor chip.
Yet he exhibited loyalty to the Empire during their mission.
While the chip is not as active as his standard clones, the Order does appear to be working.
Can you intensify the programming?
Yes.
Then proceed.
Welcome back, fellow troopers. This is TV Podcast Industries, and we are talking about Episode 1 of Star Wars The Bad Batch, titled Aftermath. I am one of your troopering or naughty soldiers, John.
I do like troopers as our new call sign for our wonderful listeners. I'm your other host, Derek, for this podcast. Yes, staying in the world of animation after our coverage of Invincible and going on to Star Wars The Bad Batch in between our next live action projects, right?
Yes, next up is Loki on June the 9th, a Wednesday, if you please. The new Friday, apparently.
So happy that it's moving to Wednesday. Just behind the scenes kind of thing for TV Podcast Industries. Every show that we've covered, I think, for the last 5 months has come out on a Friday, which means we have to record on Saturday mornings and get it up and edited and out on Saturday afternoons. At least with a Wednesday, it separates things out a bit. So we have a different day of the week that we may be able to record and get our podcasts out, which is just different for me because I've lost all of my weekends for the last 5 months since the start of the year. So.
Exactly. But we are tiptoeing our way into the Star Wars universe, or dare I say it, galaxy.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to this. I think certainly there are a lot of Star Wars shows coming up.
There are.
We didn't cover The Mandalorian. I think we wished we may have done. But certainly we enjoyed that show a lot, with little baby Yoda cuting his way around the galaxy as well.
Grogu, John? Have you forgotten his name already?
I had. Grogu.
Yes.
But yes, we're here with TV Podcast Industries. We've just finished our coverage of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So if you are a fellow Defender over on our Marvel stream on TV Podcast Industries, then please check out that show. And we also covered WandaVision as well earlier on in the year, so check that out.
And don't forget Invincible, because Invincible was an incredible
That
show,
is
much
true
more for adults
as well.
than the Star Wars The Bad Batch.
Just
Bad
a
Batch
bit, yes.
is a very different animation, but we obviously this week we celebrated the 2021st May 4th. Oh no, sorry, the 10th anniversary of Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. Was this week, so it's the 10th anniversary of that, which was just yesterday. Today is the Revenge of the 5th of May, isn't it?
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Really excited to get into this galaxy. We are both big Star Wars fans from when we grew up. John, I think, has tons of Stormtrooper statues specifically. Both of us watched all of the Clone Wars and all of Star Wars Rebels. Both loved those two shows. Really, really good, particularly as it got towards the end. And as we'll get through this show, the Star Wars The Bad Batch, I love, just really quickly before we get into any of the details of it, I love that this opens with the Clone Wars as its title, and that burns away to reveal The Bad Batch, because this is absolutely a sequel to the Clone Wars.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. With the events of the Clone Wars culminating in Order 66 and everything around that. This kicks off straight from that and includes another perspective of Order 66 as well. But if you're new to us, joining us for the first time, please head on over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can subscribe to any Jedi or Sith orientated podcast player of your choice. We are on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it. Just search for TV Podcast Industries, and you'll be able to subscribe to our podcast there.
And we also want to hear from you throughout the podcast for Star Wars The Bad Batch. Please make sure you email us with any of your thoughts on the show to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or pop it over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. Join us there and we'll talk about the show.
Definitely. For any of our existing listeners who've hopped on board to this coverage of The Bad Batch, just to let you know, we won't be doing a pub quiz for the Bad Batch series, but just to let you know, if, and of course, dare I say it, when we continue with our look into the Star Wars galaxy, I will have to use it. The pub quiz will have to be named Order 66.
Oh, wow.
As in, put in your orders in the pub.
Okay, that's pretty good. I thought it might have been put in your Order 66 at the cantina, maybe.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Anyway, let's get into the details of Star Wars The Bad Batch. Executive producers on this show are Dave Filoni and Jennifer Corbett. This episode was written by Jennifer Corbett and Dave Filoni. Jennifer wrote 3 episodes of Star Wars Resistance, one of the other animated shows in this universe as well. But Dave Filoni, we probably know him a little bit better because he's been involved with all the Star Wars projects for many, many years. Partly part creator and part executive producer for Star Wars The Clone Wars, that series, on all of the other shows, Rebels and Resistance, and most recently an executive producer, director and writer on The Mandalorian, which John mentioned earlier on. So he made the leap over to live action, was really successful there, and is now back working with the team on the team that worked on Clone Wars, working on this show on The Bad Batch.
Yeah, absolutely. Love this guy.
He is so steeped in knowledge of Star Wars. Really is.
So good.
Like, I remember those conversations when we were kids, you know, there's characters in the background of Star Wars movies, and they're the ones that your parents could always find for you when they were buying you toys. So you suddenly got to know a character like Hammerhead. Dave Filoni is the kind of person that knows the backstory of the character Hammerhead. He is really steeped in the knowledge of the Star Wars universe and explores every corner of it throughout his work. So.
Absolutely. And we've talked on this podcast about cross-pollination between comics and movie to comics. Mm-hmm. You know, this is where a lot of his ideas, in the Star Wars galaxy as well have, you know, he's cross-pollinated between the animated series, but now with the live action, you know, and part of the reason why he's on The Mandalorian, as well as involved with some of the other TV shows coming up, on Disney Plus, is that there are, characters, you know, created in the animated world that are coming to the live action. And dare I say it as well, not only that, he brought Grand Admiral Thrawn to animation. I love him.
I know you do, John. He has just done so much great stuff for the Star Wars universe over the last couple of years. The episode itself was directed by Steward, Saul Ruiz, and Nathaniel Villanueva. All 3 of them have directed episodes of Clone Wars, Rebels, and Star Wars Resistance, with Nathaniel Villanueva also being the storyboard artist on the finale of Star Wars Rebels, a brilliant finale for a great show.
Yeah.
That show is really, really good. It's quite long. And again, as most of these shows start out, they aim towards a much younger audience. They kind of grow with their audience. They get much,
absolutely,
much more adult as the series goes on. By the 5th season, you kind of feel like you're watching an animated movie, really.
Yeah. Star Wars Rebels had such an emotional tie for me. I was really upset at the end of it.
Yes.
And, I would absolutely love to see Ezra and the team in some kind of live action or introduced in some way into one of the upcoming Star Wars projects. They were a great creation. Great creation.
They really were. I'm sure as these shows go on, you'll see more of them in the future. But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the first episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch Aftermath?
Sure. Separatists are pushed to the brink as Republic forces continue to win on battlefields across the galaxy. But while assisting Jedi Knight Depa Billaba and her padawan Caleb Dume on Kaller against the Separatists, Clone Captain Grey receives Order 66 and kills Billaba. The Bad Batch overhears the order, but except for Crosshair, they feel no compulsion to execute it, and their leader Hunter lets Kaller escape. Back on Kamino, the Bad Batch encounters Omega, a young female clone who is genetically as unorthodox as they are. Admiral Tarkin later arrives to evaluate whether the clone army is of any more use to the newly formed Galactic Empire, and after receiving Crosshair's report on Kaller, he sends the Bad Batch to Onderon to eliminate a group of alleged insurgents and thus test their loyalties. When the insurgents are revealed as fugitives from the Empire led by Saw Gerrera, the Bad Batch decides to go rogue, but are captured when returning to Camino for Omega. Crosshair, who is still under the influence of his inhibitor chip, is reprogrammed by Tarkin to turn against his squad mates, and the Bad Batch and Omega are forced to flee Camino without him. Looking for friends to help them in their time of turmoil, they set course for planet J-19. The Clone Wars have ended. A period of civil war has begun.
Yes, they have. As I mentioned earlier on, this really does feel like the next season of the Clone Wars, because the Clone Wars have officially ended with that Order 66 out there. They couldn't really use the name of that series again for any more shows. So a different direction on the story, a different view on Order 66, a big moment in Star Wars movies. In the past, this was back in Revenge of the Sith, is when we heard Order 66 being given, and it's provided so much interesting content for the last 10 years or so throughout comic books and video games, and now with the Bad Batch taking on this moment effectively from the end of the Clone Wars. It's exactly how the Clone Wars ended, with all of the clones turning on their Jedi commanders as well. So I love having this view of Order 66 from a different perspective. So some people that were working directly with the clone army but didn't have the inhibitor chip, as they describe it here, this piece of code inside them that would have turned them against all of the Jedis in the galaxy, that didn't have this in there because they are different to the other clones. I think that's such a really interesting idea for the show. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it is one of the elements of the prequels, the legacy from George Lucas, that he, brought in this concept of Order 66. Because you're right. I mean, firstly, it's just so emotional, around the destruction and the killing, the genocide of the Jedi from that order. So many lost. And then you just getting it from these different perspectives, such as in the Clone Wars, where, the whole series, where it's not only about the team of Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, but it's also the troopers assigned to their unit, like Rex and, all of these different clone troopers that form that relationship, and then have this schism, this break that gets them to turn on the Jedi. Yeah. And here we have this other point of view with a group of misfit clones, effectively, one where the defects have been tampered with. And I think it's more that they still retain their inhibitor chip, but it doesn't have the same effect as a reg, as they call the regular clone troopers. It's more that their genetic deficiency and enhancements has allowed them to override that inhibitor chip effectively. And of course, to varying degrees, ultimately, as we see with Crosshair, in this, where he has that sense of carrying out the order still sort of, in the back of his mind, effectively.
Yeah, but he doesn't instantly carry it out, which I think is interesting, because all the other clones that we've seen who get Order 66, they instantly turn on the Jedi.
Yeah, it's almost like they become independent and do that order. He is still following the order of Hunter, who doesn't want to do that because they don't understand why they're suddenly turning on members of their own team effectively. Yeah. They don't have that same connection, and they've not received. He doesn't technically receive that Order 66. Yeah. I don't think, on the comlink that they have. Exactly. So there's that. And I think with Crosshair, it's not that he wants to do it. He believes in orders. And so ultimately he's given the order by Hunter not to carry it out, but is questioning the bigger order and why Hunter didn't carry it out. And that's where this schism then in the Bad Batch that we see at this early stage of the series takes place.
Yeah.
But,
now, conscious that a lot of people won't have watched previous shows, and this might be their first introduction to these characters. So let's quickly just go through their intro and what happens here on this planet of Kaller, when we have the introduction of the Bad Batch. If you haven't watched the previous shows, including Clone Wars, that's where they were introduced. They're introduced in the last season of the Clone Wars, season 7, these 5 characters, and they get the kind of backstory of who they are. I'm sure they'll go into that a bit more as the season goes on, but really all you need to know from them is that each one of them is genetically modified differently to the other clones, and each of them has a specialist subject, I suppose, or a specialist ability. This idea came from George Lucas, actually. I've read quite recently this idea that he wanted this kind of specialist group, not superheroes in the Stormtrooper way. He wanted this specialist group that all had a specific way that a thing that they were good at, I suppose. So we have Hunter, which is the leader, who's able to read everything that's going on in the environment.
Yeah, he has like a heightened sense, so almost like a tracker.
Yeah,
effectively,
or a hunter,
or a hunter. Yes, or a Jägermeister. He is that kind of person. So his senses, his hearing, his eyesight, his smell, his touch, that perceptory sense is heightened through his genetics as this clone. You then have Tech, who is, as his name suggests, is the Bill Gates of this group.
Well, an amazing hacker.
Yeah, a great hacker, understands all the tech within the clone army and now the Empire, all the soldier tech, and hacker. You have Crosshair, who we've talked about as well. He is the sniper, of the group. And you have Wrecker, who is the brute, effectively. Super strength, and is the effective bull in the china shop.
Very much so, Just push him at what you want crushed and he will crush it. Yes.
Of this group. But they're also joined technically not by one of the Bad Batch, but he is a member of the Bad Batch. He is a regular clone trooper, Echo, from the Clone Wars, who was a member of the team with Captain Rex and Anakin and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan Kenobi, but who was thought lost and killed, but was being held by I think it was the Techno Guild.
That's right, yeah.
And
I think so.
They were effectively using him to counter the Imperial battle plans, or the clone battle plans, and holding him. So there's a number of episodes in, I think, Series 7 of Clone Wars that deals with them realizing that the response of the droid army must be either a leak of military plans from the Republic, or there's someone working for them. It's Echo, who's being held against his will in like a stasis chamber with loads of different things wired up to his brain, where they're using his strategic memories as a clone trooper in order to counteract the military engagements with the Republic.
Which is that was a really good story.
It was really good.
He's very heavily operated on. I think they call him in this episode, he's more machine than man, which is why he's not susceptible to Order 66 here. Because it is an interesting one. The idea in Clone Wars was that Echo could possibly be a traitor. They were worried that he was being controlled still when he was returned. Whereas now we have a different type of traitor in Crosshair, who was a fundamental member of this team. You saw in that opening scene how they all worked really closely together. Yet once Order 66 comes in, Crosshair then turns on the rest of them, which is a really cool
and
idea.
In turn, and in fairness to Crosshair, he believes that Hunter is the traitor.
Exactly.
For not following the orders unquestioningly.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is a nice little dynamic being set up, and I guess the hunter, it will become the hunters.
Yes, they have,
dare I
yes.
say it?
You
as well.
definitely dare, John. You definitely dare.
I do.
Something else cool about this scene that I'm sure everybody's seen on the internet, but it is a great thing that we have in here. This, I guess we'll call it a cameo from Caleb Dume.
Yeah.
So a young padawan whose Jedi Knight master, Depa Billaba, is murdered by the clones when they get Order 66. Caleb Dume, we know as by a different name. We know him as Kanan Jarrus from the Rebels TV series. He's a very central character. He's the former Jedi, or at least someone practicing the Force. I don't know whether he ever refers to himself as a Jedi for most of the beginning.
No, he's kind of, I think...
He's a Force user, I guess.
Yeah, he's a Force user. I think certainly, you know, he is the one that guides and mentors Ezra in the ways of the Force. So he knows how to use the Force, and that becomes more and more forceful as the series of Rebels continues.
Yeah.
So he's definitely highly trained in the Force.
Yeah.
And as we see here then, as a young Padawan, he has been taken from his mentor and Jedi Knight, Depa Billaba.
Yeah.
In the same way that Grogu has, effectively. Like, he's spent so long that, you know, the instincts of how to use the Force, how to control it and channel it have been lost. And so maybe it's something that's happened in the same way with Kaller.
Yeah.
As he's on the run effectively now.
Yeah.
But I thought this was a great little sort of nod and reference to Rebels.
Yeah.
And I think it's something you would expect from Dave Filoni to do.
Absolutely.
And I mean, even when I just first saw it, it's just that really great thing with I guess Order 66 is you normally see, you know, a new group of Jedi being, dare I say it, slaughtered by the clone troopers.
Yeah.
But, you know, from that you hopefully get a few escapees and this wider Jedi world that has survived that massacre and has survived into the Republic. And it was great seeing Caleb, and I kind of really liked that, you know, because effectively he's a kid, and that Hunter has this, you know, view of not wanting to kill a child, basically.
Absolutely.
You know,
well, he knows there's something wrong here, given that the order is to kill Jedis. Perhaps they have turned on them, but when he's turning on a Padawan, and we know they had at least met before the Bad Batch came in to help out the clone army, because Caleb was sent off to get the reinforcements. So we know they had some meeting before that. So he said, I'm not gonna let him be killed by everybody. Also really good that the actor Freddie Prinze Jr., who was the voice of Kanan Jarrus on Rebels, was the one that voiced Caleb Dume as well. So a really good cameo there. Anything else about the opening or the introduction to these characters that you like, John?
It's just seeing them work as a team, and all sort of, you know, because they don't have the same rigid kind of mentality as the regs. Yeah. And so, you know, they're doing a lot of crazy battlefield antics, which is really good to see.
Yeah.
You know, it starts where the droid army is coming up this pass, and they send rocks down on them. You know, all the other clone troopers, along with Depa Billaba and Caleb, are back in the trenches, thinking that they're going to have to retreat effectively, and in come the 5 Bad Batch to effectively save the day and move the droid tanks over a cliff edge.
Absolutely.
And just, you know, I like the fact Hunter uses a knife as well.
Yes.
You know, that's a really neat little touch from him. And again, it plays up to that hunter and tracker element of him. And
it's cool how they play this into the rest of the episode with the other big character that's appearing here, Admiral Tarkin, when he comes to visit them on Kamino after they've come back from this mission, I guess. Admiral Tarkin is there, so we know him as Grand Moff Tarkin in the Star Wars universe. He's
not quite a Moff yet.
Not quite a Moff yet. Still don't know what a Moff is, and I've been a fan of Star Wars for 40 years.
And do you call him Tarkin or Tarquin?
No, Tarkin. Always Tarkin. We have seen the character in Rogue One. And we have seen him in, obviously, his biggest role in Star Wars 1 or Star Wars A New Hope. So he's a very central character. And I like that they've brought him in here into this show. I like the idea that he's effectively looking at wiping out the clones. They don't need any more clone troopers now. They've moved on and become this new order, or a new empire, as we know, is a bad thing in the future. But they no longer need clone troopers. They're looking for something different. And he thinks there might be some potential in the Bad Batch to replace the clone troopers, I guess.
Yeah, I love how Admiral Tarkin is sort of deliciously bureaucratic evil in a sense. Yeah. Like it is almost something from, it's like Kafka-esque, it's like you could imagine him in military supplies with, the project sheets and everything. He's determined to do things like as brutally and as evilly and as bureaucratically as possible. Yeah. He has quite, he's kind of like the evil civil servant, really, that's come in to wipe everything out for his minister, which is the Chancellor Palpatine. So it's I find there's something kind of
deliciously evil.
Deliciously
I know
evil.
You want to say
yes,
that,
it really is. And again, this is where we get the sense that things are moving on in the high command of what was the clone army.
Yeah.
Where that he's coming here to effectively assess the clone troopers and primarily the regular clone troopers as to whether they are fit for purpose, really, in the new galactic empire.
Yeah.
Whether they can fulfill the roles that they're going to be asked to do, which is effectively empire building. And I love that he comes here to determine the capabilities, but sees the Bad Batch in a mess hall fight, and puts them to the test first with first of all with dummy rounds, and then with live rounds to test their capabilities.
Yeah, it's a really good, fun little battle here between
absolutely.
between the Bad Batch and the armed troopers, I suppose, as well. And I love seeing them all work together and using their strengths. I think it works really well as a good introduction to the characters. If you didn't think that opening battle sequence showed enough of their talents, look at this one here and look how they work around not having any weapons at all, really, to be able to take down these live round toting enemies. I think it's really interesting. Also, just to call out how disposable Tarkin thinks of the clone troopers as well. Just the idea that he's just going to go, well, we're just going to cancel all the future orders that you have, because when we enslave all the people of the old Republic and get them in our uniforms to form our new army, that's going to cost about a third of the price it would cost to make more clones. So that's it. That's the idea for the future for him.
And you really do get the sense that somewhere on his Star Destroyer is a huge kill switch that is effectively going to eliminate every clone trooper. That, maybe there isn't just the implant that is in there to do Order 66, that it will also, effectively blow their heads off or something like that.
In my head, I had this idea that he was just going to use them as the front waves and then going to start backing them up with stormtroopers. And once they're all wiped out, then we can just replace them with stormtroopers.
Yeah. And I think as well from the Clone Wars with Echo and Rex, there is that moment where they realize about this implant and that every clone has got one of these implants in it as they build up towards the Order 66 finale within Clone Wars. But I think as well that there is a notion in that when they're trying to fiddle with it or remove it from Echo, that it could cause damage if removed, or that it does have some kind of kill element to it.
Yeah.
We also see Omega for the first time here, because during the battle testing, then it's Wrecker who actually gets shot and injured, and so whilst he's in the infirmary, we get the first sight of Omega here.
I suppose if you're going to keep running at bullets, one of them will eventually hit you.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, the other new character for the show, I suppose. I think we pretty much instantly guessed that she would be an enhanced clone or a genetically modified clone in some ways. Partly because, she also has a New Zealand accent, like all of the clones do. So, it's just an instant thing, in your mind when you hear a New Zealand accent in the Star Wars universe, you go, okay, clone. But possibly the first ever female clone, because the entire clone army have all been male in the past. And in the show, just for people that haven't watched Clone Wars before, all voiced by the one actor. So every single clone that we've ever seen in the 7 seasons of Clone Wars and in Rebels and in this show, all voiced by the same actor, D. Bradley Baker, over the years. So fair dues to this guy. The idea that he's standing in a room, talking to himself for hours on end, playing 6 or 7 different characters at times, some in opposition to the other, and giving them all individual characterizations is really good, because you can always tell the difference, even when you're not looking directly at the screen. You can always tell the difference between the characters that he's got. So, that's some feat to do over the years.
Absolutely. And Omega is kind of really closely watched as well by the Camino handler that is with her. And is, if she runs off, is being, tracked down by her handler as well. So again, it just adds to the intrigue as to what, Omega is, what her role is here. And certainly the final scene from this first episode suggests that, there is a reason she's being held quite close to her Camino, handler, as there is the conversation with the Prime Minister of Camino, about her effectively being allowed to leave at that moment with the Bad Batch, with Wrecker, Tech, Echo, and Hunter. So this is kind of interesting to see unfold, I think. Is she a sister? I thought she might be force sensitive as well, possibly.
Be interesting. If she was a clone that was also force sensitive, I don't know how they would have approximated that from cloning. That's a really interesting idea. But I also like that the Camino builders effectively just don't really want to tell Tarkin any more bad news as well. Like this might damage their relationship and possibly loses the contract for the future. So don't give him any more bad news until we have really bad news to report. I was definitely getting vibes in this. So you mentioned the kind of final bit of this episode. It's definitely getting vibes of a very old UK TV series called Blake 7, sci-fi series from the 70s, and I think it stretched into the early 80s. But there was definitely this vibe of Crosshair where the character is someone that is constantly challenging the leader of the group, and now he's hunting them. Now he's going to be the one that will be sent out to get them, I suppose.
Yeah, you don't quite know whether you should distrust him or whether your affinity shouldn't be with him because he's still accepted by the group. But, it's increasingly becoming apparent that he's moving away from the full group of the Bad Batch, from Wrecker, from Tech, from Echo, and from the leader Hunter. I mean, because even you don't get the sense of there's not the same level, if any, of questioning to Hunter from Echo, Wrecker, or Tech, like you get from Crosshair. And Crosshair is continually at Hunter about it all the way through. And the other thing, just before moving on to Blaster Point 2, is that the events on Kaller, this idea that Hunter allowed the Jedi Caleb Dume to escape is known by Admiral Tarkin through the report of Crosshair. And Admiral Tarkin, acknowledges that in Crosshair, he was the one that showed or continued to show allegiance to the Order and now to the newly formed Galactic Empire.
Yeah. It just makes you feel that this inhibitor chip, the thing that carried the Order to be released, it makes it feel like with Crosshair, it's malfunctioned. With everybody else, it's broken and not delivering the Order to them because he's kind of fighting against it. Yeah. And he's kind of in the right because he's been given an order that he wants to follow. So he's kind of in the right for that, but he's not willing to turn his gun on the rest of his team in order to carry out the order. You know, he's kind of willing to, go along with them till he gets a little bit more reprogramming, from Tarkin. So it feels like early on he's willing to kind of still follow the additional orders, or just follow no orders at all, and make them up as they go along, like they have always done with the Bad Batch, except for this Order 66 kind of a sticking point. But they are set off on this mission to test them, by Tarkin. This is our blaster point number 2, meeting the insurgents, because we made another big character, I suppose, from Star Wars universe here. They're sent off to prove themselves, by gunning down some insurgents. Another, warning, at least to Hunter, that he knows, Order 66 must be something completely wrong here when they come across this group of insurgents on this new planet of, Onderon. And they see kids and old people there with this group of insurgents, these people that are told they must be killed.
Former Republic soldiers, not clone troopers, but from the Republic alliance of planets. And coming to Onderon, you know, Hunter and the rest of the Bad Batch, their thoughts are that these insurgents are droids, that they're remaining droid forces or members of the alliance, and guilds that formed the droid army.
Yeah, but even, you know, Tarkin has said that it's the Jedis who turned on Palpatine. You know, we saw the big speech from Palpatine given to all the clone troopers. It's the Jedi that turned on them, so maybe they think they're going to hunt down Jedi. And they're kind of okay with that, but when they get there, they find it's families, it's older people, it's children, and they're being asked to gun them all down and kill them all. And this is where would they meet a future, I guess, rebel leader, Saul Guerrero.
Yes, they do. And yeah, it's only a small scene, really, and it's all playing to the notion of the fracture happening within the Bad Batch around Crosshair, but ultimately Saw Gerrera gives them an explanation that, you know, they're no longer welcome in the new empire that has been formed from the pieces of the Republic, that they don't believe in Palpatine's claim, and they are on the run from the clone army and the old Republic Starfleet. So it is, I mean, ultimately the Bad Batch get captured, and Saw Gerrera gives them the opportunity to come with them, or remain. And Hunter takes the decision for the group to go back to Camino, after this, I love the fact that this mission to prove themselves is absolutely a Tarkin trap. It's totally set up, you know, and there are probe droids spying on them as they go to effectively kill a bunch, or mainly a bunch of unarmed civilians who are on the run, who are refugees, and are protected by just a few number of Republic troops.
Yeah. And once again, something that I really like seeing when they do these kind of shows is seeing a backstory of a character, seeing a character that we kind of know from Rogue One, not too in depth. You just know that he's a very experienced leader of this freedom fighter or terrorist group, effectively, and he's gone through a lot over the time that he's gotten to that point in Rogue One. This character now of Saw Gerrera right at the beginning of his career, the earliest point we've seen him now, and just seeing him on the turn, I suppose, on his way to becoming more and more important to that rebel movement, effectively. So that would be really interesting.
And he features in Rebels as well.
Yes, he does.
So like, you know, he's popped up a number of times in the animated series.
And he even popped up in the awesome PlayStation game that came out last year as well.
Yeah, and here we have it again. But it is. He's young. He's fresh.
Yeah.
But
he seems really rational now. He's kind of like, you know, you can join us and we can go away from this area. Whereas when we see him in Rogue One, it's very much about blowing everything up.
Yeah,
to take down
time and you know, being continually on the run has taken its toll. I mean, in Rogue One, it's even that he's questioning the leadership of the rebels,
Exactly,
and the
New
you know,
Republic,
the
right.
nascent New Republic. So that's, you know, it's an interesting journey for this character, and here we're seeing it very much kind of bookended on, you know, fresh freedom fighter, resistance leader here, and I guess all those probe droids after him has taken its toll.
Exactly. Let's close it out with blaster point number 3, the escape from Camino, because as you say, all of the Bad Batch and Omega are all captured and stuck in the same cell together. Don't really understand why all of them are in exactly the same cell. Not the greatest of ideas, but again, using their smarts to work out a way to get out of here. I like that Hunter realizes quite quickly, well, hang on a second, there's no way that these are actual cells that could hold people like us. This is a clone building facility. They would never have had cells. So these are obviously just something that's been a temporary build, so we can definitely get out of these. Right, get Wrecker to run the right part of the wall to get us out of here. And then using Omega again, you know, this is clearly a show that's aimed at a younger audience. So, making Omega central to this plan of getting everybody out makes loads of sense. To have her involved in the Bad Batch's plans, before they allow her to join up with them, I suppose. So I like the escape for that reason. It's good to give her something to do, something really, really fundamental for the show.
Omega gets a fan in Wrecker who likes, you know, the fact that she did it and took out one of the clone troopers by, trashing the overhead grate on him, as she allows them to escape by releasing the force field. I mean, and it's also just that, you know, the rationale for them going there is that, you know, Hunter senses that things are not on an even keel with what he, I guess, still considers to be the Republic, but ultimately is now the Empire. And he believes that Omega, you know, will be in trouble because she's a child, and I guess he understands that she's a clone as well.
Yes.
Again, the importance of that, we're not entirely sure yet.
It's Tech that worked all that out, wasn't it? We hear him have that conversation with everybody kind of going, I thought you all knew, because it's so simple to guess that she was a clone. But in that final escape, we get one other nod maybe to to some abilities that she has, because she picks up a gun for the first time as Crosshair has them all pinned down and is going to take out the rest of his old team. She's the one that shoots the gun out of his hand. So an instant shot that most people couldn't make, I guess, as her first pull of the trigger, which she even comments on later on. She goes, I don't even know how I did that. I picked up the gun and was able to take that shot. So
with Crosshair, it's that he's taken away from the rest of the group whilst they're in the prison, so that his inhibitor chip can be reactivated or made stronger by the Kaminoans and by the orders of Tarkin.
Right.
So
we're going to go with Kaminoans. I think that's how you say it.
Kaminoans, yeah. So, you know, Crosshair at this stage is, you know, he's aiming up Hunter here through his sights.
Yeah.
He is looking to take them down, prevent them from escaping. Yeah. And ultimately fails with the intervention of Omega and her shooting skills right at the end, which allows them to escape from Camino. You know, there is that nice touch where it's her first time in space.
Absolutely.
I thought that was a real interesting shot where it focuses on her face as she's looking out at the stars, and you've got the stars kind of reflected in her eyes. I just wondered whether something might just be a reference or a touchstone to something. Okay. I that's why I kind of thought maybe she could be, you know, force sensitive in some ways. I don't know.
I just had that idea in my head when, you know, we went to see some of the Star Wars movies in the cinema when we were kids, you know, back in the early 80s, you know, that first impression, because we didn't get to see it at its first release in the 70s, but we saw some of them in the 80s. Is that not just our eyes when we saw hyperspace for the first time?
Yeah, it could be.
I think it was just that.
It could be,
reference to that. But there's definitely something special about the character. She was named Omega after all, which is quite a big name to give to a character that's supposed to just be stuck on Camino forever. So it makes you feel that there's something quite big about the character of Omega.
Yes, and certainly coupled to the Camino Prime Minister and her handler saying they better not let Tarkin know or the Empire know that she's gone.
Yeah, exactly. One last thing. They're off to find some friends because there's a very short list of friends for the Bad Batch. And they're off to the planet J19.
Yes.
Which I don't know that planet yet.
No, I don't. I can't remember.
Yeah, I feel
even
like
if I do.
If we'd watched all of season 7, we might have seen something referenced in there about who's off on planet J19. But there are some options. There are some Jedis that are still alive that know the Bad Batch. There are some clone troopers that may not have followed Order 66 who may be available out there. Or it could just be Saw Gerrera. They may be going to catch up with Saw Gerrera.
Yeah.
Or it is a massive Star Wars universe, so there may be somebody else out there that we don't know already.
A whole new wormhole to go down.
It will. I think that's it for the coverage of the full episode. John, what did you think of the opener for The Bad Batch, Episode 1, Aftermath?
I really enjoyed it. It was really great to connect back with these troopers. I loved the references to Rebels, to the Order 66, and, some good little action sequences here. Also really good for, first episode, Bad Batch. You want to see the 5 of them, out on missions.
Yes.
And instead, it's been fractured with Crosshair sort of switching, at least at this stage, his allegiance to the newly formed Galactic Empire. The fact that it's as well on that cusp of, the aftermath, hence the title of the Order 66 and, the dissolution of the former Republic and the establishment of this new Galactic Empire.
And the end of the Separatists, remember? They were quite a big thing
so
for many years.
The end of the Separatists is really, really interesting. I would definitely give this 4 reprogrammed inhibitor chips out of 5. I really like the style of animation. I like, as I said, the references to Rebels, previous Clone Wars, and to the wider Star Wars universe. I love seeing Caleb Dume in this. That's a nice little touch.
It's a good cameo.
It really is. Cameo. Yeah, having Saul Gerrera as well, and of course the 5 boys of the Bad Batch, and with that bit of intrigue from Omega. So I definitely think this is worth a watch. It may not be for everyone, but it's certainly within the spirit of the Clone Wars animation series. And I really hope that we get to see the creative juices here, coming from, Lucasfilm, and with Dave Filoni and Jennifer Corbett, involved here. So really, really enjoyed it. Yourself?
I really enjoyed it as an opener. I know there are problems with this, but the whole point of it is that it's setting up these characters to go on a new journey. So there's a lot of things that it needs to reintroduce you to them or introduce you to them for the first time. So I think that's always what's there in that first episode. It's a 50-minute or 70-minute, short movie, effectively.
Yeah.
That's almost 3 episodes long if you think about the time of the rest of the episodes we're going to see in the season. But it came out on a Tuesday, and this Friday we're going to get the second episode of The Bad Batch. So not very long to wait for this story to continue. So as an opener, I think it works really well, introducing it to everybody and kind of setting you off on the journey, to see how they're going to experience, the Star Wars universe. And I'm looking forward to it, for one, definitely. And that's coming up on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. We have some feedback for this first episode. You can send in your feedback to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or over on our Facebook group. You can also leave a comment there on all things to do with Star Wars Bad Batch. Just head on over to facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries.
Absolutely. I will be putting up spoiler posts for each episode as usual. So if you want to talk about the show, make sure you talk about them in the spoiler posts.
Yes. On Facebook, Deanna Maskell says, Just watched it and loved it. Maybe it's a pandemic exhaustion. Maybe I just miss my son grown and flown. And this series is a nostalgic journey. But I loved the characters and the drama. Captured all the things I loved about the Clone Wars series. I think both WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier influenced the way I think about this show. There's a lot more going on here than the first level story. I keep thinking about American politics, and the show is giving me some much needed hope. I can only hope we can locate our own Clone Force 99 before democracy is lost. This was the May 4th teacher appreciation I needed. We'll definitely be able to add this story to my pop culture class in the fall. We focus on the personal values explored by our pop culture faves, and there is a lot of that here.
Well, that's fab.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really interesting kind of perspective on it, because as I started off with the podcast, it's, you know, you see Hunter and he has this protective element, for Caleb at the start and also with Omega. And I guess it's that thing about Hunter, you know, I guess the flip side of that could be the shepherd who protects, you know, both his crew of the Bad Batch, but also those less fortunate. And certainly there's an element here with, his concern for the safety of both Caleb Dume at the start and with Omega on Kamino with the evil Admiral Tarkin there.
You almost called him Grandma.
I
Tarkin
really
there,
did. It's very difficult.
I know. That's some really good feedback though, Deanna. Like, you know, there's always been that thing with Star Wars where sometimes it can seem quite simplistic, you know. Clearly, there was a Nazi influence on the stormtroopers and Darth Vader and the Emperor and all of those kind of characters when Star Wars was first created. But as the years have gone on, those elements of it have become a bit more complex, I suppose. There's still very much a dark side and a light side in the TV shows and the movies that are out there, but they've become grayer and they've become more interested. And when you're talking about, you know, Grand Admirals, and when you're talking about massive empires, you are talking politics in a lot of senses. So it's really interesting to make those connections. Thanks so much for the feedback, Deanna, and thanks to everybody else for listening to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Deanna, and thanks as well to our fellow troopers. I guess when we cover something in the Star Wars universe that is as such not related to clone troopers or modified versions of clone troopers, we will say fellow Jedi or something like a little more, rather than fellow, you know, stormtroopers or, or whatever.
I think troopers also, everybody's going along for the ride, right? We're all here marching together, watching the show.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
There you go.
But with that, we'll be back this weekend with our chat about Star Wars The Bad Batch Episode 2, Cut and Run, which will air on Disney Plus from Friday, May the 7th. Remember to subscribe over at tvpodcastindustries.com. And of course, remember to review us, subscribe, rate us on any Jedi or Sith podcast catcher of your choice. Please share the podcast, because sharing the podcast is, of course, sharing the love.
Yeah, we hope you've enjoyed our discussion about this episode. Really looking forward to more of The Bad Batch when we come back this weekend. Speak to you soon.
Thanks so much, fellow troopers, for joining us. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep trooping. Bye.